everybody, it's me, Lily Rose, the admin here at Encouragement Corner on Facebook, and we are continuing on today in the book of Acts, chapter 27. We've seen a lot of Paul's ministry here and the start of the church. We've seen Jesus' promise fulfilled when he told the disciples, hey guys, I gotta go. I'm going up to heaven, right? And I'm coming back, so don't be afraid. I am coming back. But I'm going to send something even better. I'm going to send the Holy Spirit to you guys, and he's going to live in you. So the power of the Holy Spirit lives in you. And Jesus, he's coming back, guys. He's not gone forever. He's promised to return and take his children home. And we will be in a place where there is no more sorrow, no more tears, no more pain, no more suffering, no more evil, sinful world. It's all going to be gone one day. And how beautiful and how much hope that brings to the believer. Excited for that. Paul has had a difficult journey here, hasn't he? He has gone from being a tyrant, I guess, is that appropriate to say? He was arresting Christians and throwing them in jail and having them murdered for following Jesus. And God gets a hold of him, right? On the road to Damascus, he sees this great light, and it's, Paul, why are you doing this? And Paul says, who are you? And he says, I'm Jesus. I am Jesus. I'm the one that you're going against. Stop it. Come follow me, right? And in that decision to follow Jesus, he knows that his road is going to be tough. It's going to be full of difficult trials and tribulations to endure. But God doesn't just leave him there of saying, hey, you're going to have a difficult road. He gives him the faith and the courage to do what needs to get done. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. If you were with us the last 2 days, you knew about the trials that Paul was facing. The religious leaders probably very frustrated with Paul at this point because he is not just a Roman citizen by birth, guys. He is also a very learned Roman citizen from birth. He has gone through all the Jewish schooling. He knows the Torah. In fact, he was probably, I think he was part of the Pharisees. So he was smart. So he knew the arguments and he knew how to combat them and combat them well. And so in their frustration is how I'm seeing it. They sent him to King Festus first, and then Festus and Agrippa at the same time. And had Paul not said anything, had not appealed to Caesar in Rome, he would be free man right now. Because Agrippa and Festus found nothing illegal about what he was doing. It's definitely nothing deserving death. So he would have been a free man, but instead he is following the will of God, that the message of Jesus Christ would be spread all over the world. And so he knows he's got to get on this boat and head to Rome and go and appeal before Caesar, because how else would he get an audience with Caesar to tell him the good news about Jesus, right? All right. This chapter has befuddled me because there is a lot of ocean and sea type ships and sea and lingo like that I don't understand. It's above my head. If you want to give me a seaworthy lesson sometime, I would be up for that. But I'm going to do my best. So we're in chapter 27. It says, when the time came, we set sail for Italy. Paul and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius, a captain of the imperial regiment. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was also with us. We left on a ship whose home port was Adramyttis on the northwest coast of the province of Asia. It was scheduled to make several stops at ports along the coast of the province. The next day, when we docked at Sidon, Julius was very kind to Paul, and he let him go ashore to visit with his friends, so they could provide for his needs. Putting out to sea from there, we encountered strong headwinds that made it difficult to keep the ship on course, so we sailed north of Cyprus, between the island and the mainland. Keeping to the open sea, we passed along the coast of Sicilia and Pamphylia. landing in Myra, in the province of Lycia. There, the commanding officer found an Egyptian ship from Alexandria that was bound for Italy, and he put us on board. We had several days of very slow sailing, and after great difficulty, we finally neared Cnidus. But the wind was against us, so we sailed across to Crete, and along the sheltered coast of the island past the Cape of Salmone. We struggled along the coast with great difficulty and finally arrived at Fair Havens, near the town of Lasea. We had lost a lot of time. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall, and Paul spoke to these ship officers about it. Men, he said, I believe that there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, danger to our lives as well. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to his ship captain and the owner than Paul. And since Fair Haven was an exposed harbor, a poor place to spend the winter, most of the crew wanted to go on to Phoenix, farther up the coast of Crete, and spend the winter there. Phoenix was a good harbor, with only southwest and northwest exposure. Again, no idea what that means. But apparently, maybe, I don't even know. If somebody knows, please tell me. When a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought that they could make it. So they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength, called a nor'easter, burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. We sailed along the sheltered side of the small island named Cauda, where, with great difficulty, we hoisted aboard the lifeboat being towed behind us. Then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it. They were afraid of being driven across to the sandbars of Cyprus off the African coast, so they lowered the sea anchor to slow the ship and were driven before the wind. The next day, a gale-force wind continued to batter the ship, and the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. No one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, Men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. You would have avoided all this danger and loss. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night, an angel of the Lord, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood beside me. And he said, Don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said. But we will be shipwrecked on an island. Scary words, huh? About midnight on the 14th night of the storm, as we were being driven across the Sea of Adria, the sailors sensed land was near. They dropped a weighted line and found the water was 120 feet deep. But a little later, they measured again and found it was only 90 feet deep. At this rate, they were afraid we would soon be driven against the rocks along the shore. So they threw out 4 anchors from the back of the ship and prayed for daylight. Then the sailors tried to abandon the ship. They lowered the lifeboat as though they were going to put out anchors from the front of the ship. But Paul said to the commanding officer and soldiers, You will all die unless the sailors stay on board. So the soldiers cut the ropes to the lifeboat and let it drift away. Just as day was dawning, Paul urged everyone to eat. You have been so worried that you haven't touched food for 2 weeks, he said. Please eat something now for your own good, for not a hair on your head will perish. Then he took some bread, gave thanks to God before them all, and broke off a piece and ate it. Then everyone was encouraged and began to eat. All 276 of us who were on board, after eating, the crew lightened the ship further by throwing the cargo of wheat overboard. When morning dawned, they didn't recognize the coastline, but they saw a bay with a beach and wondered if they could get to shore by running the ship aground. So they cut off the anchors and left them in the sea. Then they lowered the rudders, raised the foresail, and headed toward shore. But they hit a shell and ran the ship aground too soon. The bow of the ship struck fast while the stern was repeatedly smashed by the force of the waves and began to break apart. The soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners to make sure they didn't swim ashore and escape, but the commanding officer wanted to spare Paul, so he didn't let them carry out their plan. Then he ordered all who could swim to jump overboard first and make for land. The others held onto planks or debris from the broken ship, so everyone escaped safely to shore.